Hi, it's Kristen and I am going to be reading some romance books. So this is a new series that I'm introducing to my channel where every now and then I read a couple of romance books. I'm gonna try and do like a slight theme each video. So for this first one, I'm going to be reading fantasy romance, and the books I've chosen to read are Tusk Love by Thea Guanzon and Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. So I'm going to start with Tusk Love, and this is based on a story devised by the cast of Critical Role. Critical Role is a D&D role-playing game. They do different campaigns, and in campaign 2 the cast came up with this book, Tusk Love, that the characters came across, and then throughout the campaign they made jokes, they made references to this book, the characters read the book, and it's like this steamy romance between a woman and a half-orc character. Very like funny concept within the game, and it's like a fan favorite thing to reference. And so then recently Critical Role decided to get a romance author to actually write this book, and that sounded very funny and fun to me anyway. But then when the book came out, I've actually just heard really good reviews of it as a book. So this, like I said, we have our main character Guinevere, who I believe is just a human woman, and she is expected to marry a man and be like a dutiful wife and like raise her family's station and all that kind of stuff. But really she just wants to like be free and have adventure. She is like traveling on a road one day and is attacked and is saved by a half-orc called Oscar. And then I'm pretty sure they just travel and adventure together and fall in love. That just sounds cute. I'm intrigued by the Critical Role elements because obviously this is going to be set in like the world that Matt, the DM of Critical Role, came up with. So this is very much set in Exandria. I know people who've read this who have nothing to do with Critical Role don't know what Critical Role is and they've enjoyed it. But I'm excited as someone who loves Critical Role to like get any potential references in here. Excited to dive into this. And then after that I will be reading Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. This I heard Riley Marie talk about years ago, and I'd always intended to pick it up, but originally I believe it was self-published, and so copies of it were less available and more expensive. Not wildly expensive, but more than a regular paperback. And so I always like held off on purchasing it, but then it got picked up to be like repackaged, republished. The cover is gorgeous, and so I pre-ordered it when they announced it, and even though that pre-order came in ages ago, 2025, I still have not picked it up, even though I'm so excited. But I think that is almost what puts me off picking it up, because I'm so excited to read it that I'm worried it won't hit in the way I think it should. This is about a woman, Halla, who has unexpectedly inherited an estate from a wealthy uncle, and she has a bunch of relatives who don't think she should have inherited this estate, and so they're trying to like swindle her out of this inheritance. And she gets locked in her bedroom, or locks herself in her bedroom, and is inspecting an ancient sword on the wall. Out of desperation, she unsheathes it, and suddenly a man appears. His name is Sarkis, he tells her, and he is an immortal warrior trapped in a prison of enchanted steel. And he is then like sworn to protect whoever wields the sword. Again, adventure, falling in love along the way, I believe. And yeah, these are like 2 books I'm really hyped about. So I really hope I like them. I'm going to be diving into Tusk Love first, and we will see how I get on with this. I've never read anything by Thea Guenzon before. I have read T. Kingfisher before, but I've only read T. Kingfisher's horror. I've not read any of their fantasy romance stuff, so exciting. Let's get into it. So I've been reading Tusk Love. I'm actually just over halfway through and I've yet to update you. So this basic premise I gave you was sort of correct, sort of incorrect. We have our main character, Guinevere. She is betrothed to marry someone, so I was correct on that front, as it says on the back. But she is attacked by some bandits and saved by Oscar because she is traveling to meet her family. She is going from like her home where she's grown up, where she's lived for years, to a place called Nicodranus, which is on the Menagerie coast, which is where her parents are, because they are merchants and they're trying to like sell their wares. And in Nicodranus is where they met this lord who says he will marry Guinevere. So she is like on her way there when she's attacked by bandits and her guards are killed. And Oscar shows up and gets her out of the scenario. We also learn at that point that Guinevere is magical in some way and is quite secretive about her magic, and like something more is going on there, which we get more information to as we go along in the story. And where I'm at is when she is finally like talking to Oscar about that and what the whole deal with that is. So far, I'm getting more into it, but I'm not loving it the way that I wanted to. Like, fantasy romance based on like Critical Role, I had such high hopes and I am liking it, but it's not hitting quite in the way I wanted it to. I think my initial issue was with the characters, because Oscar, although he seems very nice, he's very like protective, he wants to help Guinevere out, even if it's like begrudgingly at first. I don't feel like there's much to him. He feels a bit like cardboard cutout of the ideal fantasy love interest in a man. And like, I get it. I get why people would want to read that, why, you know, people who are into men and want the ideal man would want to read about just a guy who's nice and protective and will look after you and will listen to you and considers your feelings, etc. But there's like an element to that which makes him just like slightly like too perfect in a way, which makes him not super interesting on his own as a person to me. And then with Guinevere, I feel like she has much more about her. Like, she feels like the stronger character in terms of characterization between the two of them. However, she also annoys me because although she has been brought up in like a little bit secluded, a little bit isolation, like sort of lonely, surface level relationship upbringing, parents not very nice, so hasn't like got deep emotional bonds with people, and was just taught to be like very ladylike and very proper and has good manners and stuff. She just feels like slightly too naive to me in the way that she just thinks everyone's like nice and takes everyone at face value. And like maybe that would be a nice way to live, just trusting people for what they say. But like considering she started the book being attacked by a bunch of bandits, I don't understand why she would then go into like these towns where she doesn't know people and just like trust in everyone she comes across. So her naivety and her being like over the top nice and prim and proper is a bit annoying. I do feel like as we've gone on, I'm liking the characters more as I'm getting to know them more, as they're getting to know each other more. But I don't know. I think like their attraction to each other is like immediate, and that's okay. Like you can look at someone immediately and go, they're hot. But they're very like wanting to be physical with each other from like very early on, considering they don't know each other. They're in very dangerous circumstances. And yeah, they like they just don't know each other very well. And on the one hand, I can get like, yeah, meeting someone hot, being in a dangerous situation and just like being attracted to them, and so feeling that physical thing with them. But I think where I find issue with it is that they're then also being quite emotionally intimate with each other when they don't know each other very well. And I know this is only a short book, so like we kind of have to get to it, but I do wish that this was a slightly like slower burn, you know? All of that being said, like this sounds very negative. I am enjoying it. I am finding it very readable. I'm whizzing through it when I am reading it. And I'm enjoying it enough to the point that when I'm like off doing other stuff, I am thinking like, looking forward to getting back to my book later. Like I've been at work all day and I have been thinking, I'm happy when like between shifts I can read a bit of my book. And like yesterday again, I was at work in the morning, but was going, can't wait to get home, want to read more of my book because I know that there's like a steamy scene coming up and I just want to see how it's written and if I vibe with that. And on the steamy scene front, fairly well written. I don't really have issue with it. Some sex scenes can be very cringy. These, fine so far. I am enjoying it in terms of like actually reading it, getting through it quickly. The writing's like fairly inoffensive. It's, yeah, readable, easy to read, fun enough that I'm just like, I'm here for a good time, you know? And it's short anyway, but because it's so readable, I am getting through it really fast. So yeah, here for a fun time, not a long time. So I'm going to get back to it. I'm sort of thinking maybe I could finish it tomorrow. That would be nice. And I can move on to the next book, which is a little bit chunkier. So yeah, interested to see how their relationship is going to go based on the fact that Guinevere is betrothed. And so like what is going to happen there for them to like surely end up together. And there are like mercenaries after Guinevere and a box that's in Guinevere's possession. So I am also like intrigued to figure out what's going on with that situation as well. So I don't know when I'll next update you, if I'll just get further through and update you, or if with the rate I'm reading, I'll just update you when I'm done. You'll find out in the next clip. I finished reading Tusk Love by Thea Guanzon. It was cute, it was fun, it was
sort of what I wanted, what I was in the mood for. I didn't love it as much as I'd wanted to, or like anticipated loving it, but it was a cute, sweet little romance nonetheless. I do think we also got some character growth with Guinevere, especially like coming into her own, coming into her magic. That was like a nice storyline. I actually, in terms of that, could have done with this being a little bit longer so we got more development of that side of things, and like her magic and what it means to her, and her struggling with her magic and like learning how to use her magic, because we touch on her feeling like she should learn and tap into it, and then she just sort of manages to by the end. And I would have liked more, yeah, development of her actually like coming to terms with things, because I do think the ending wrapped up everything quite quickly, because we were like maybe 30 pages from the end when like another big thing happened, 30 or 40 pages, and I was like, we're gonna have to like get to this and come to some conclusion quite quickly. But overall, I had fun with it. It was cute, it was sweet. The sex scenes were pretty good, but like they didn't wow me. I don't know. Oscar was like a very caring love interest. He was very nice. I don't know, I never felt like that much chemistry between them for the level of how much they were like in love with each other and willing to like die for each other or put themselves in danger for each other. Again, I think if it had been a bit longer, we'd got more development with the magic, we could have had a little bit more development between them earlier on, before they like started sleeping with each other and were like already quite committed to like protecting each other and stuff. So yeah, slightly longer and a bit more focus on like the fantasy setting would have been fun. I think if you're not familiar with Critical Role, this can read like just fine as a fantasy novel. I did like that I was familiar with Critical Role, and so when they mentioned like places or gods and stuff, I had a bit of context for it. There was one bit in here where they were talking about Melaesmere, which is this like old elvish city, and I'm currently watching campaign 3 of Critical Role, and the characters are currently in Melaesmere, so I was like, I know exactly like what that's like. So as a Critical Role fan, this was nice, because whenever they mentioned a place, I was like, I remember the characters going there in campaign 1 or campaign 2, and like I can picture things maybe a bit better than someone who isn't familiar and doesn't have the background of the Critical Role campaigns. But like this does still read, I think, fine as like a standalone fantasy on its own if you're not familiar with Critical Role. I would give it like a 3.5, because like it was a bit of just like an average fantasy romance to me, but it was very readable and I did enjoy it. And like I said before, when I wasn't reading it, I was wanting to get back to it. So even though I wasn't like in love with it, I did still have a good time with it. I do think Theo Guanzon writes in a very readable way, like a very easy to read way. I was getting through it quite quickly, but I didn't like super connect with her writing in that it didn't wow me. There was nothing like particularly beautiful about it. There were no passages where I was like, wow, that's so well written and well described. But it was engaging. So like a I don't know, slightly mixed bag, but definitely leaning towards more positive with this. I think I just maybe had slightly too high hopes, and if I hadn't had such high hopes, I could have potentially rated this higher just for being like an enjoyable, cute, fun, sexy fantasy romance. But because I'd been like really anticipating it and I'd perhaps hyped it up too much in my head, it didn't quite live up to my expectations, but not a bad book. So that is it for me reading Tusk Love, and I will jump into Sword Heart next. Back in this room, it's like the one good room to film in at the moment because we don't try and keep it cool. So we don't have the windows open, so there's no noise coming from outside. We don't have the curtains drawn, so it's not really dark in here, but it does mean that it's quite hot. So I'm going to try and not film for too long right now. But I did want to update you because yesterday I started reading Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher, and I was like nervous going into this because again, it's one I've really hyped up, and since I'd also hyped up Tusk Love and didn't love that as much as I thought I would, I was nervous going into this, and also because I think I had a bit of a realization about Tusk Love and just like romance I enjoy generally as to maybe why I didn't enjoy that so much. And I think it's because within a romance book, I like a slow burn, as we discussed, and obviously Tusk Love was on the shorter side, so we didn't have the length to be able to do a slow burn. But if I can't have a slow burn, I still like the anticipation of couples like interacting and not interacting. So I really like when you're waiting for the next time that the love interests are gonna encounter each other, or when they're next gonna see each other, and what their next interaction is gonna be, like where it's gonna be, how it's gonna go down, and like waiting for those moments. But because in Tusk Love they're just together the whole time, I didn't get that anticipation. So for example, like another romance I fairly recently read was Funny Story by Emily Henry. And although the main characters, Daphne and Miles, live together, so you have a lot of them being around each other and interacting, they also like have their own stuff going on. Like they have their own jobs that are separate from each other, and so you'll have like lots of scenes of them together, and then Daphne will go to work and Miles will go to work, or Miles will go help someone out with something, and so they're separated, and you'll get scenes of them by themselves. And then it's like Daphne's at work, she and her friend discuss like going to a bar, and you're like, okay, that's going to be the next time they see each other. Or Daphne will be at work and then Miles will pop in, and it's like, oh, an unexpected encounter. And so even though I love the scenes of them together, I also get a bit of like a thrill from wondering, yeah, when they'll next see each other, what their next interaction will be, how it will go down, and all that stuff. And that like excites me in a romance because, yeah, it's adding anticipation. There's an element of like building up to something, whereas with Tusk Love, they're traveling together, so they're around each other all the time. So even though they're like very cute and sweet together, it never satisfied that like, I wonder how their next interaction will go, where it will be, because other than like a brief moment where Oscar went to talk to someone and get some sandwiches, and Guinevere towards the start like went shopping, they were never really separated. And even in those moments, you knew that it was just Oscar has gone to get sandwiches and then he'll be back at the inn and they'll interact. So that will be their next interaction. It wasn't like, I wonder when they'll see each other next or anything like that. So then going into Sword Heart, knowing that this is going to be a lot of them traveling together, I was like, oh, realizing that I love the anticipation of interactions and potentially romantic encounters. Is this going to hit? Because, or am I just going to have the same feeling as I did about Tusk Love? However, being only 100 pages in, we did have a moment where it made sense for Sarkis, the man from the sword, to go back into the sword, and for Hala, our main character, to go into this inn by herself, where she made a friend who maybe wasn't really a friend, and there was like a whole thing there. So they were separate for that point, and then circumstances arose where Hala really needed Sarkis, and so she like managed to pull the sword free and he came out to like help her. And I quite liked that because it meant they were separate for a bit. There was a little bit of time where they weren't interacting. Hala was by herself, and then yes, circumstances arose that like necessitated their next interaction. So I'm sort of hoping we get a bit more of that, of him like going into the sword and they're separated, so that I can like anticipate when their next interaction will be. I do wonder like where this is going to go, because like the back of the book just says she's inherited this estate from her wealthy uncle. Her family are trying to like wrest the inheritance away from her. She picks up an ancient sword. This guy comes out of the sword and he's sworn to protect her. And like we've had that. We've had her great uncle died before the beginning of the novel. Her family were trying to like marry her further into the family so they could claim her inheritance, and she decided it would be best to kill herself instead, and so she took the sword off the wall in order to kill herself with it. And then Sarkis came out of the sword, and now they've run away to get her away from her family, and they're traveling the roads and they're like going to another nearby village, city situation. So we've had all the plot that's on the back of the book already. So like I don't know where this is going or what's going to happen next, which I quite like because I really don't know what to anticipate. And I do like them as characters. We've got like a similar setup with a bit of a grumpy sunshine thing like we had in Tusk Love. Guinevere and Hala are both very like chatty, like wanting to know about the world, hadn't ever really traveled before, so they're very like interested in everything that's going on. And then Oscar and Sarkis more like world weary, I guess. But I do really like Hala and Sarkis's interactions. I think they have like fun banter, jokey vibes. And I like that Hala's a bit older. They keep calling her middle-aged, referring to how old she is, and she's 36. But I guess in the time this is set, that is middle-aged. And she's like previously been married, and so she is a bit more like mature than Guinevere was, which I think I'm liking. And I don't know if it's just because I'm older, so I will relate more to a 36-year-old character than a 20-year-old character. But yeah, I'm liking it so far. I'm interested and intrigued to see where it goes. I'm looking forward to this becoming romantic, but I like that we're over 100 pages in and they've sort of like said that they find the other attractive, but in a very like passive, like it's just a fact kind of way. And we've had like a couple of almost like cringy for the character moments where they've like said the wrong thing and been like, oh, but I didn't mean that, and like let's just move on. So like we're getting those moments, but it doesn't feel rushed or anything. They're not already like kissing or having really intimate moments like intentionally yet. So yeah, gonna dive back into this and see how I get on. I will update you again. I don't know when. You'll find out in the next clip. I continued reading Sword Heart and I'm still liking it, so that's all good. But I do find that even though this is like a slower burn than Tusk Love, because the characters are mostly just like thinking about each other, there's been one kiss and I'm like 300 pages in. I do still find that when the characters talk about like potentially loving each other, it just feels a bit intense, going from like lusting after each other, liking each other, becoming like friendlier, to love. Maybe I'm just a cold-hearted bitch. But they've known each other maybe like a couple of weeks at most. So it feels like quite a jump. And I know that they've gone through like quite intense experiences together. There's an inheritance on the line. They've both been in like danger of kidnapping or being injured. They feel very protective towards one another and like they get along and they just like each other. And I think that's really nice. But then they suddenly start thinking like, do I love him? Do I love her? And I'm like, do you know each other that well? But I feel like that's just me being cynical and I need to just like buy into the romance elements more. This is a romance book. I need to just go along with it. But I am enjoying it. I really like their banter, their interactions. We now have another couple of characters traveling with them, Zale and Brindle, and I really love Zale, particularly their interactions with Hala. They have like really funny bantery moments together. And then Brindle, also very amusing to me. Like this is just like a very fun book, very fun, very funny. And yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm just over 100 pages from the end now, getting like swept up in the story, wondering how it's going to end because Sarkis is, tied to this sword, immortal. Hala is not. So I'm wondering what's going to happen so that they can be together. And also Sarkis has like alluded to in his like point of view that he has a secret relating to the sword, and if Hala finds out, she maybe won't like want to be with him, be friends with him, have anything to do with him. So I'm intrigued by that and wondering how this last little section is going to go. But yeah, liking it, invested in the friendships, invested in the romance. I like the fantasy world. There's very like interesting creatures, and I think the world building of like the gods and the different like priesthoods or like cults who follow the gods is very interesting. And I know that this is like set in a larger world. They're like the Paladins, Grace, those series are also set in this world, and another duology or something is set in the same world. So I'm very interested to read other T. Kingfisher books set in this world to get like even more context and world building. Yeah, I'm just here for the vibes.
Finished reading Sword Heart. Towards the end, we got a little bit of drama, some more like tension between the characters, and some dangerous circumstances. And I think that was maybe like my favourite part of the dynamic. Or it made like the tenser elements balanced out the banter elements, and like all together I think that worked better for me than them just being in love after like 2 or 3 weeks, which makes me think, based on like reading this and reading Tusk Love and reading like Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies and stuff like that, that I don't know that cozy fantasy romance is like necessarily my thing. I always like have a cute time with it, and it's fun, it's sweet, but in terms of like getting really invested in the romance, I think I'm maybe better off reading like fantasy that has romance in it, rather than fantasy romance where like the main focus is the romance and then the plot line is sort of secondary, or they run parallel to each other. Because I love romance, I love a good romance book, and like I will happily read contemporary romances that the whole focus is the romance, and I'll be happy with that. But with my fantasy, I think it having like other world building and like magical elements, I get interested in those, but like I want more of it, and I want more I think of like the politics and like more tension and danger and stuff. So yeah, I don't know, I feel like in books and shows, the relationships that I really gravitate towards are ones that are very like messy. There's like high stakes, there's betrayals, people potentially being injured, life or death kind of circumstances, which is why I think maybe fantasy with romance could be more for me than like cozy fantasy romance. I need to have a little think. But in terms of world building, as I said before, this was very interesting to me with like the gods and what each god represents, and how the like different faiths like work together and stuff. So I am excited to like delve into the world more through the sequel, because I like the way this ended. I do want to read more. And also I have like the Paladins series, like Paladins Grace and stuff. Of the two books, there's definitely like similarities here with sort of the characterization, and then them like traveling, being on the road being a big part of it. Sword Heart I think was my favorite of the two. I would give this like a 3.25, 3.5, and this is more like a 3.75. Could have been a 4. Like if I'm feeling generous, it's a 4. Because I had a bit more fun with it, and it was a bit more fleshed out because it was thicker. But I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. Like both of these I thought could be like 5-star reads, and they weren't, which is what makes me think maybe like cozy fantasy is more of a like cute, fun, palate cleansing kind of book for me, rather than what I hoped it would be, which is like a new favourite genre. But maybe I just also need to try more cozy fantasy. Maybe I'll find a cozy fantasy romance that like really works for me. Neither of these are bad books by any means. I had good times with them. I whizzed through them both, had fun. I do think actually in terms of like the romance, it's, you know, up to an author, their own prerogative of what they want to write. But like, if we're building up to a couple getting together, like I would have maybe liked a bit more like when they finally like physically got together, which we did get in this book. So basically I'm saying I wanted more sex. Or just like more detail. I wanted like a well-written sex scene. There were like hints of it in here, and you got like, you know, moments, but I would have loved it more played out on page. But if T. Kingfisher doesn't want to write that, that's their choice. I think like mix these two books together, like take the sex scenes or like the amount of sex or the explicitness of the sex from Tusk Love and put it in Sword Heart, and like, yeah, it would be a solid 4-star, I think. So yes, but I've read 2 fantasy romances that I've been meaning to read for a while. Happy about that. They're both gorgeous covers, so colourful. Would recommend them both, I guess, if you're like getting into fantasy romance, because I think they both have like interesting, intriguing world building, but it's also not too heavy on that to like overwhelm you. So these were fun. I had a good time. 2 more books off my TBR, so I'm happy with that. And if you have any recommendations for more fantasy romance, can be cozy, but I would also like maybe want something more higher stakes where like the romance is still a big part of it. I don't want like a tiny romance where it feels very background and like we could do without it. I want like intense, devoted relationship, but with like more of a backdrop of fantasy, magic. You know, either like the characters are in danger of death, or like the kingdom is in danger, there's like politics going on, or there's like, yeah, high stakes stuff. If you have any recommendations, please leave them down below for me, and I will see you soon with another video.